Yes. Yes. So, Karenza Lewis, United Kingdom. The social benefits of publicly engaged archaeology in the 21st century. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's wait for them. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this conference. Just to introduce what I'm going to say, my main research area of interest is quite close to Nikolai Makarov's, in fact, looking at rural settlement. And some of you will have heard me talking about that in the past. But much of the work I've done, and nearly all of the work I've done over the last 15 years, has been with members of the public, working alongside university archaeologists. And just as the background to this, in the middle 20th century, millions of people got interested in archaeology through television and being more able to travel and visit sites. But in the 21st century, particularly in the UK, but increasingly in other countries, there's a more hands-on role is becoming available to members of the public to actually contribute to creating new knowledge, making new discoveries about archaeology. So I'm going to talk this afternoon about the benefits of that participation in the archaeological process. And I think this will pick up quite a lot of themes that have come out of several of the papers today, which is about how does the public relate to the archaeology, how does it understand it, how does the public benefit, and how do we as archaeologists justify our work to the public. So just to put this into context, there have been a number of international treaties, particularly across Europe, about heritage and heritage management and heritage protection. The 1992 Valletta Treaty particularly highlighted protection here, and I apologise for the text all being in English here. The words in blue are the sort of particularly highlighted points. In 2005, the Faro Convention sort of rewrote or updated the desired approaches to archaeology and heritage across Europe, still focusing on protection, but as a new priority, focusing on the right of citizens to access and participate in that heritage. And you can see this key statement is that everyone has a right to benefit from cultural heritage and to contribute towards its enrichment. Now, this hasn't always been possible or acted on in many countries. But in 2013-14, again from Europe, the Joint Project Initiative from the European Commission developed a new strategic research agenda for cultural heritage, with, as you can see, any number of the sort of major organisations advising, contributing to the advice on that. And this strategic research agenda identified 4 key priority research areas in consultation across 17 European member states. They're the ones highlighted in grey in the map at the bottom there. And of these 4 key research areas, you can see that one here is connecting people with heritage. And I won't give you the whole detail of that, but the notes on this, connecting people with heritage, points out that it relates to exploring access, looking at the issues that enable people and communities to connect with heritage, underpinned by sustainable management. And also in the research agenda, and under this connecting people theme, social capital is highlighted in the priority areas within that. So out of 20 drivers towards change in cultural heritage in Europe, social capital was ranked 3rd out of 20. And social capital, as you can see, there are many definitions of social capital, but I've just put this one up. It's really about the way in which the relationships that people have with other people can benefit them and their communities. And you can see here, again, tourism transport is the top driver, digitization is the second, and social capital is coming in here, ranked third, above even global migration. This was in 2013-14, whether this might have changed now. In fact, the Strategic Research Agenda is being updated this year. The deadline for responses are coming up very soon. But the research agenda highlighted this again. Social capital, mutuality and volunteering will have a significant impact on cultural heritage. And the report goes on to say, one of the respondents said, it is a huge blind spot in modern cultural heritage research. And this ties in also with priorities in universities in the UK and beyond, which is about public engagement, again about that relationship with wider society beyond that particular institution, whether it's beyond the archaeological profession or in this case beyond universities. And public engagement is about the ways in which the benefits of research, you could easily put archaeology in instead of research, but it's about the benefits being shared with the public with the goal of generating mutual benefit. And then it goes beyond one directional dissemination, just giving a lecture or putting a story out there, to inform, inspire, involve, upskill and enrich. So what I want to talk about is the way in which this participation in archaeology has sought to achieve some of those aims of delivering wider benefits. Just as a bit of background, in the UK, up until the 20th century, it was only wealthy people were educated enough and had enough leisure time to have any interest in archaeology. Into the mid-20th century, the first half of the 20th century, in the post-World War II period, the sort of growing middle classes and the better education that people had more widely led to a proliferation of local archaeological societies in towns which carried out excavations in their local area. So this happened quite widely in the 1950s and 1960s. By the time we got to the 1980s, awareness of the damage that was being done to the archaeological resource, not by the community archaeologists, but by industrialization, by agriculture and construction, meant that the emphasis focused very much on preservation, and this is reflected in the Valletta Treaty. And excavation was considered a last resort only to be undertaken by professional archaeologists because the sites were too few and too vulnerable to be touched by anyone apart from professional archaeologists. However, since the 2005 Faro Convention, which to some extent reflected changes in ideas that were already coming in and has also then encouraged those ideas to be promulgated, public engagement in the UK has again been encouraged. By 2010, when a survey was carried out, there were 2,000 local archaeological groups across the UK involving 215,000 people, as you can see. 41% of these groups were actually involved in excavation. And this is out of a country with a population of, say, 60 million. So it's not a huge number, but it's a significant number of people involved in excavation. Most recently, the next turn has been towards well-being, looking at the benefits that people get from this sort of involvement. So, what I'm going to talk about is what are these benefits and what evidence is there that actually taking part in archaeology can deliver a benefit. And I'm going to look at 3 case studies from fieldwork I've carried out over the last 3 years. One is a community excavation on a known heritage site. The second one is a series of educational projects working with teenagers. And the third one is a community project in a deprived 20th century housing estate. So to look at the first one of these are community excavations on a site called Clare Castle. It's a castle site in the middle of a small town called Clare in England. Now, the aims of the excavation are interesting within the context of public archaeology because the intention was that the excavations would be carried out by volunteers, supervised by professional archaeologists from the University of Cambridge, which is where I was at the time. And as you can see, the aims are about increasing knowledge, understanding and appreciation of the castle and its environs, to widen the participation of people in the heritage of the area, to allow people to develop skills, practical and analytical skills, and to help manage the monument and interpret it and present it to the public in the future. And then to increase historic understanding of the area, to encourage employment, sustainable tourism, and encourage inward investment. Now, we weren't aiming to do all of 5 just in the excavations, but it would hope that the outcomes would underpin future development. We also did a series of wider public engagement. The site was open access. Visitors could turn up whenever they wanted. There were handouts available. We had twice daily site tours. We had a media engagement strategy which covered social media, radio and television. There were on-site displays for people to look at. And we had opportunities for people to feed back their opinions, collect their ideas and their thoughts about the visit through visitor book comments and online blog posts. We put on a public evening talk during the excavation about castles to put the excavations into their context for people who didn't know about medieval castles. And then there was a post-excavation public talk in the winter about the results. So just to give you, this is the site. So this is Clare from Google Earth. The castle site is in the middle here. Doesn't show up terribly well, but I think you can probably see it quite well on the LiDAR image here. That's the castle motte. The inner bailey is coming around here, and the outer bailey is there. And in fact, you can see here's the motte. There's the inner bailey, there's the outer bailey. This is a shot from the ground, taken from about point B, with the castle motte in the background and a little bit of the stone of the keep that was on the top of it surviving there. So I'm not going to talk in detail about what was discovered, but I do want to stress that all of these excavations were carried out to high professional archaeological standards and significantly advanced knowledge about that particular site. So we found large amounts of bits of window glass, we found traces in new walls, and in the first set of excavations we actually found a pair of human legs. This was particularly significant because there had been rumours, sort of stories in the village that there were bones in the castle. This was the first time, though, they'd actually been found in situ, and all of us in this room will know, if you find a human burial, it's very easy to work out, even just from the legs, what orientation the burial was in, which way up it was facing, and so on. It was very apparent this was likely to be a Christian burial, so we came back a few months later, again with community volunteers, excavated a trench nearby, which produced a series of beam slots and post holes from buildings and traces of mortar from buildings, and also another 3 skeletons there in various poor stages of preservation, but importantly, they survived beyond this light layer here, which was where a railway had been put right through the middle of the castle bailey in the 19th century. It was assumed that all of the medieval archaeology had been destroyed. Clearly, we could see that it hadn't been, and it did survive. So that's the archaeological discoveries, but what I want to focus on is what the participants gained from it. So we had about 90 volunteers on the project and about another 20 in the second set of excavations there. So one of the ways we collected ideas about how they felt about it was just through comments on feedback forms. So I just thought I'd put some of these up, and these are literally just as they've come out of what people have written down. And again, I could leave it up for a while. It's very nice reading these sorts of comments. Themes come up again and again. Good for body or mind, harder than it looks on telly, it's fun. You learn such a lot about your county's history, meet new people, enjoy being accepted as a valuable member of a team. And this is interesting, I think. Somebody who particularly enjoyed just listening to everyone's theories, even changing throughout the dig as to what we're finding. All ideas and comments always welcome, however daft. The idea that people were talking about what was turning up, they were talking about their ideas, they were thinking about the process, but also just really enjoying being in the open air with people of similar interests, and even the rain and the mud. And that got commented on quite a lot. You don't dig in Britain without discovering rain and mud. But we also collected some statistical data, some sort of metric data. So we asked people for an overall rating, and as you can see, it's heavily weighted in the excellent. So this is excellent, good, okay, poor, very poor. We asked would they recommend it to others. Absolutely every single respondent, and nearly all people did fill in feedback forms, responded yes. And we also asked them about their attitudes to heritage. So this is, would they take more interest in archaeology and heritage generally in the future? And again, you can see the vast majority are strongly agreeing or agreeing. Interestingly, the one or two who disagreed put little qualifying statements on saying, I couldn't have been more interested when I started the dig, so there wasn't necessarily a negative comment. And demonstration evidence of this is one of the outcomes was that people on the group formed themselves into a community archaeology group after these excavations had taken place. It was founded in 2014, it's still going this year, they've just had their annual general meeting for 2019. And then we asked the Clare Castle excavation participants again whether they'd take more interest in the archaeology and heritage of Clare, of the place where the dig had happened. And again, the responses are all positively, strongly agree, so it's making people feel more interested and committed to both heritage generally and locally. And again, there's follow through on this, there's evidence on this, because people in the town put together a funding bid to our national lottery and actually managed to get a grant for £1.5 million to develop. This is the old engine shed from the Victorian Railway, which is going to be developed into an education centre. Lots of clearance work done to make the mound, make the castle more visible, and better signage so that people can understand the archaeology better from the visit. And as part of that 1.5 million project, there's another 3 years of excavations, and these are the first excavations that took place last September, not by my team now, but by a different team, who are coming up with very nice finds, as you can see, including this rather nice 14th century gold ring. So when we're looking at the benefits, we can actually say people have had an enjoyable experience. It's enriched their lives, and that's important. They've got new leisure interests. They've got improved social networks. People reported again and again this idea of meeting new people, enjoying working with people. New skills, numerous skills, I'll come back to that. New heritage assets, new discoveries, that ring, other sorts of better understanding of the site for the community, that those heritage assets are better known, and therefore they can be better managed for the future, protected for the future. And there's new learning resources for local schools and for visitors to come to the site, and an increased interest in the community's heritage, and a better appreciation of that community as somewhere to live and work. And this again, all of these contribute to well-being. If you feel you live in a good place, you feel better about your life because you feel you live in a good place. And of course, there's also the enhanced attraction of the place as a leisure destination, which can bring in investment. So the second case study is very different. This was a series of educational projects for teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17. The aim was to raise their academic aspirations, particularly about university, to boost their self-esteem and confidence, and again, instill new transferable skills and knowledge. The activity they took part in was excavating a 1 metre square archaeological test pit in a medieval village that's still inhabited today, as part of my research interest in villages that are still inhabited today. So the students, the children, all completed a 1 metre square. The third day, they came into the university to experience life at university and find out how their work was contributing to advancing understanding. And then afterwards, they wrote a report on their excavation, analysing the finds and explaining what it all meant. Again, what was discovered, I could talk about this for a long time, and many of you have heard me talk about this, but from all of these 1 metre square test pits, just as one example, this is a village where we did over 100 of these test pits, and we can see the impact of the population collapse of the 14th century. We've been talking about crises several times today, and the 14th century was definitely one of those periods. The black circles show the number of sites that produced pottery predating the 4th century, and this map, the black circles show the amount of pottery dating to after the 14th century. You can see the impact of the Black Death and various other setbacks on that community, all coming from these test pits. And we can scale this up. This is Purton is the red line. This is the East Anglian average. This is Eastern England here. London is just about here. And we've worked in all of these sites. It's Purton there. We can see the general picture and scale this up. So looking at all of these sites, Purton down here, this is the size of the settlements before the Black Death and afterwards. And we've got data specifically on the number of settlements that shrank, the shrinkage in the number of inhabited sites, 40 to 45%. So this is what the work by the young children discovered. But what we also looked at again is what did they get out of it? How did they benefit? And we have surveyed this very carefully. We have questionnaires before the course and at the course end. So over 14 years that this scheme ran, from 2005 to last year, we had more than 7,000 students who'd taken part in it. 84% felt more positive about going to university, and more than 80% felt it had helped them develop new skills. But we actually know precisely what those skills are. It's very easy to say they learn new skills. We've gone through all of these. I won't ask you to read all of these, but we have identified them within various categories, and we've assessed them by means of descriptions of what sort of level of skill is expected to get a low grade, a medium grade, and a high grade. And I just put this in, and I apologise for this, I was looking at this last night. This is verbal discussion, and I just noticed this description here. This is low-level verbal description. Many of you will be aware that in the UK we are having a troubling time with our politicians at the moment, and I'm not going to mention Brexit, but this is an almost perfect description of the way our present candidate for the next Prime Minister behaves. Some of you may see a familiar trait in some of your own politicians reading those descriptions. Interestingly, I don't have time to give you too much time to read that, but this is the high-level behaviour, and you can read this and just wish that more of our politicians today had been on the sort of activity where they'd learn something about how to discuss respectfully. So when we say that students have developed skills, we know precisely what sort of level they're performing at and how many of them feel that they have benefited from these various skill sets. And so we can go through these benefits that the students have acquired and be very confident that they do have those. Again, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip over that, because what I want to do is come to a third case study and then put it into a European context. So this third case study was on a 1960s social housing estate. The aim was that people living on the estate would take part in excavations, similar 1 metre square excavations, with some of the same aims as the other projects, connecting people with their past, like at the Clare excavations, developing skills for the future, like the teenagers, to understand the estate's history, and to champion council housing, social housing. The background to this is that the particular estate layout was inspired by an estate in New Jersey, built in 1928, with the idea that fronting houses onto pedestrianised green spaces would provide healthy spaces for people to live in and children to play in outside their homes with children from other families, away from cars and under the sort of gaze of their parents perhaps in the house. Radburn in New Jersey is a National Historic Landmark, and we've seen that the Colorado site is likewise, so a bit of a theme there. Similar estates were built very widely in the UK with this arrangement of the houses fronting onto open greens, but in many cases in the UK these are not National Historic Landmarks, these are now deprived estates, and in fact this Radburn plan has been blamed. So the excavations were carried out across this estate. You can see this sort of layout here of the houses fronting onto the greens. The green test pits are ones that were carried out on those pedestrianised greens. What was discovered was that the test pits on the greens produced large amounts of this sort of material culture. We were talking this morning about what do you keep and what do you throw away. This is the stuff that in most excavations you just throw it away. It's 20th century crap and half of it's plastic. But actually these are bits of children's toys, and we could then compare that data with the test pits from the villages and see that these test pits on this housing estate greens were producing 4 times as many child-related items as medieval villages, as the 20th century layers in medieval villages. So this is showing that actually that plan worked. But the participants gained as well. We checked that. Again, that enjoyable experience. This is they set up a Facebook group. So these are the comments. Brilliant day with lots of finds. Awesome day today digging. Well ready for a glass of wine now. They're posting photographs of what they've been finding. And we also collected the metric data. Again, how would you rate the activity? Excellent. Enjoyed it much more than I expected to. Most of the answers there. Which aspects did you enjoy? And again, we've got saying, so working in a team, meeting new people is scoring highly again. Discovering things from the past, learning about the past, learning something new. Very similar themes coming up to other digs. But this is a group of people who would not normally take part in any sort of heritage activity. This is a state with high levels of social deprivation, low levels of educational attainment, high levels of unemployment, high levels of teenage pregnancy, all those sorts of indicators. But they are enjoying, responsive to, and enthused by archaeological participation in exactly the same way. And again, they feel they know more about the archaeology of the state, they feel more engaged with the archaeology of the state, they think they will take more interest in the history of the state in the future, and again, more interest in history and archaeology generally in the future. And the scale here is the light green is strongly agree, blue is agree, yellow is neither agree nor disagree, and strongly disagree, of which you can see we had no disagreements, as it were, there. And again, we looked at skills, so we could see the sort of way people are gaining skills here. Again, this is their own self-assessment, heavily weighted towards the yes, they either feel it benefited or didn't make a difference, particularly in these areas of sort of working to set procedures, working persistently, being a good team member. These are the sort of statements that people can put on job applications to demonstrate their fittedness for a job or a college course. So we've done these projects numerously across Eastern England. This is where the council estate project was. And we can overview these benefits, and these are really only some of them. This is coming from participation in archaeological excavation. It's not rocket science, well, bits of it are rocket science, but it's simple participation. And because we have this evidence. We've now recently started a project called Community Archaeology in Rural Environments. This is EU funded in the Netherlands, the Czech Republic and Poland, extending this similar approach, these 1 metre squares, into other countries to see if those similar benefits can be achieved in countries with very different traditions and histories, both of archaeological engagement and indeed of connection with local communities. I think I'll skip over the aims of that because you're interested, you can go to the website and have a look. But the aim's really simply about advancing understanding of how these projects work, how do they deliver their benefits, what are the benefits, what's the evidence. This is the challenges. It's about meeting societal challenges, and all of today really has been talking about, you know, what are the challenges for the future, and we've heard several papers talking about that sort of forward thinking. So these various challenges, social, economic, intergenerational inequality, what community archaeology can offer, transferable skills for education, we've seen that in the project with the students, and then how it can contribute specifically. People feel alienated from educated elites. Again, that's a theme that's cropped up today. Growth of post-work or non-work. People need more engaging activity to keep them interested if they don't have a work to go to. Depletion of rural communities. Neglect of subaltern sites. You know, we get mass tourism in, you know, the great centres, the Acropolis and so on, but what about other sites with a heritage and history that simply don't get visited? And of course, the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about much, fiscal cuts, reducing funding. So we know there's much less community archaeology in the Czech Republic, where there have been no hands-on community archaeology projects before. In Poland, where although recent surveys have shown this more passive engagement through television and visiting sites, again, hardly any opportunities for people to take part. And then in the Netherlands, although there's participation in heritage is starting to be talked about, again, there are very few actual activities, and giving the chance to do that will be new. And in fact, the first excavations have just taken place in the Netherlands. These are the first ones that's already taken place last month. So here's some photographs from exactly those same projects in the Netherlands, the very first one of these projects. And the outcomes, I'm just about to finish, the outcomes, again, you can see how would you rate the test pit digging, all rated towards the excellent and good end of the graph. Would you recommend it to others? Again, very well, everybody saying they would recommend it to others. And which aspects did you enjoy? So we're asking them the same questions so we can compare the data from the UK, because if it's just that us Brits are different, then you don't want to start trying it anywhere else. But you can see here we've got the same thing, meeting new people, working in a team, particularly this meeting new people, getting to know other people in the place where you live, discovering things from the past, learning about the past, learning something new, those same aspects scoring again and again and again that people are appreciating. And what we're also doing is working with psychologists, very much cross-disciplinary working, well out of the humanities into the social sciences, who are using social identity theory to try and drill down into how and why does this improved sense of well-being that we can see from the feedback, both from the comments and from the statistics, how does it actually work? So we've been working on these questions, and then of course we have to translate them into Dutch and then reverse translate them back into England to make sure the meaning hasn't crept, and we'll have to do the same in the Czech Republic and Poland. So that's my summary point, really. We have evidence that enabling members of the public to take part not only increases our knowledge of the past through enabling work to take place that wouldn't happen otherwise, but it also develops this social capital and builds well-being. And it's all helping to show archaeology not as a liability, but as an asset. Not just an economic asset, but a social asset as well. And so I would say that building capacity for this responsible, participative archaeology must be a top priority for the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a very convincing paper. And I don't think that you have to... Oh, yes, go ahead. Please, please, please. Of course, of course. It was a joke. Go ahead with your question.
Great stuff. Can you tell us where the funding is coming from, under what rubric? That is, do you go to the archaeology, or are you going to some other description of... What is the general description of your work when you go to an ERC?
Well, the funding, for the JPI project, it came from a JPI call for cultural heritage, so that was a European Commission call. For the schools project, that came from, well, it came from a variety of sources, initially from the European Social Fund, actually, who were funding it for educational purposes. And the community project on the castle came from our national lottery. So this is all money coming into archaeology. It's not being diverted from elsewhere.
That's correct, not the multinational one. That is coming under which rubric?
Sorry, I don't understand.
What is the program that is funding that?
It's the JPI, Joint Project Initiative call. Joint Project Initiative, JPI,
Right.
call came out last September, September 2017. So it came out as a whole series of these projects. There would be collaborations, multi-country collaborations, carry out essentially similar linked projects in different countries. But yeah, it was the call for meeting global challenges, cultural heritage meeting global challenges.
Professor Hansen.
It's quite impressive, this general mobilization for heritage, and that so many people find for a certain while group which is working together. How do you choose the objects? What is heritage? Who defines heritage in this context? I mean, the castle is the heritage in this village or so, but why not the prison or the hospital or other places?
So I was going to go back to the microphone. Yes, in fact, I cut out the slides which explained actually we did do some test pitting in the same town a couple of years before, so we started off looking at the whole town, and while we were doing that, there was an interest growing in the castle, and the reason we did the work on the castle was because the local authority had sold the site. They used to own the site, and they had converted ownership of it to a group that formed in the town to take over managing it as part of austerity cuts following the financial crisis. None of our local authorities have any money, so they were trying to get rid of an asset that they were having to pay to maintain. So the town were very keen to do some excavations there to help them manage the site and build interest in it. So that's why that site came out rather than any other site in that town. In terms of the sites we choose for the work in the villages, that's simply done on interest, really. We needed a reasonable spread of them, so people would be close to, there'd be, children in different parts of the region would have access, so we wanted a reasonable coverage. But we work with the communities, so it is very much community archaeology. If there's interest in the community, then it's very much a bottom-up project, so it's people living in the community who will speak to their friends or neighbours, or put an advert in the local shop, or go around and hand out leaflets at school or whatever, asking for people to volunteer sites to have a test pit in. So it's people who want to get involved and then encouraging others to get involved. So it's very much about the community making that project happen. So to be quite honest, Sven, we kind of follow where the interest is, and we've now got lots of other communities that are bidding for lottery funding to do similar sort of work. The project on the council estate was Research Council funded. We had money from our National Research Council under a sort of theme looking at utopias, because there's a sort of story about utopian planning in there, which I don't really have time to go into. But it was trying to look at this, particularly look at the impact of trying to get really disadvantaged communities engaged, because it's quite easy, well, it's easier to get, you know, if you've got an affluent village where everyone has very high levels of education and there's lots of middle-aged people who are maybe just retired looking for something interesting to do and they're used to making things happen, it's easy to get that to happen.
To make a long story short,
I'm sorry.
probably the fact of the excavations constructs the heritage. That's it. The pit is the heritage. It's in itself. Okay. We have the long line actually. No? No? Okay.
Just, the picture is so positive. Are there any obstacles, difficulties, just negative aspects, problems? Yeah, because it is such a successful project that it seems that it is just a paradise which is very easy to just construct.
Well, this is 15 years' work I'm reporting on here, so yeah, you know, there are always challenges. The housing estate, the last example, we had a meeting to first promote the project and get people to volunteer. And I used to be on television in the UK. I was quite well known once, and we had this meeting and 4 people turned up to it. So you could have thought this isn't going to work and just given up. But what we did was talk to those 4 people round a table. They suggested using Facebook, social media to promote it, and it built up from there. Yes, there have been problems along the way, but what we do find is it's about working with people. You know, we have people who are taking part in these projects, and we do try and make them feel involved and to get what they want out of it. So we haven't had any problems. We've had no problems with people going off and doing more illicit digging afterwards or anything like that. You know, we haven't had people hijacking it for unhelpful purposes. The challenge, really, I think the only real challenge is whether it will work in other countries. And at the moment, it's looking, you know, it seems to be it's about we were talking about story making earlier, weren't we? And telling the story and making sure that it's us archaeologists who get the story of what we found, the significance of our results, get that story clear so that people can't misinterpret it. And we find that's what's helpful, because people are thinking about their sense of place. So there have been snags and things along the way, but overall I think it has been positive, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go on. Otherwise our dinner would be